Hey everyone, welcome to your lecture 4 for Principles of Marketing. So today we're going to talk a little bit more about consumer behavior. So last class, we started off with consumer behavior 1, thinking about how a rational consumer makes their choices. We talked about kind of the different processes or the different steps that a consumer goes through when they make a purchase, going from kind of need recognition to information acquisition to evaluation of alternatives, then the purchase decision, and then finally the post-purchase engagement. One thing, so some of you have requested live transcription. So there's currently an error with Zoom right now where live transcription leads the Zoom call to basically fall apart after about half hour, which is what we saw last week. So unfortunately, I won't be able to do live transcription today. So yeah, if you're having a bit of trouble following along, then reviewing it afterwards with the transcription that Zoom provides with the recorded version of this lecture should help you out. So until they get that bug resolved, unfortunately, I can't do the live transcription without kind of crashing the call. Okay. A few reminders. Your group project proposal is going to be due at the end of next week. So that's October 8th. For that, you can upload a copy on Quirkus. That's all I need, just the digital version. And just one per group. So you'll have kind of a group submission for that one. Then the next thing will be the midterm, which is going to happen after fall break. So the midterm is going to take place during class hours. So it'll be from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. On Thursday. And there'll also be a lecture that week, but it'll be purely recorded. So for you guys to kind of, and it'll be a little bit shorter, but yeah, that'll be something you guys can look at on your own and talk to me about during office hours. All right, so the midterm itself will cover only lecture material. Anything that's referred to in the textbook is not going to be kind of tested. Focus on what's in the lecture material. So take-home test notes going to be kind of these 2 hours during class. And it'll be, a timed 2-hour test. Yeah, and it'll be, open book and everything, right? You'll have access to your resources at home, but it will be during the class. And are the readings essential before writing the midterm? So the readings help, but they're not necessary. You can perform very well on the midterm without doing the readings. Are the readings essential before attending the lectures? Again, they really help, I think, with understanding. And, the readings I give you are typically also connected to the surveys. So it can help you do the surveys and write better answers for that. But the reading material from the textbook is not strictly necessary for the exam. And just a reminder for your project proposal. So that's going to be 2 pages, double-spaced maximum. Don't go beyond 2 pages double-spaced. If you have like a reference that you want to make and you want to put the URL for the place that you found this reference, you can put that on an extra page. But in terms of content of your own writing, only 2 pages. And what I need is for you to clearly identify the product or service, and then tell me what's the market and why is that kind of a good market, right? Why is this going to be kind of the market that you want to sell this particular product or service to, right? Remember, it can be an existing company's product. It can be a totally new product that you make up. All those options are fine. The example I gave on Quirkus is one that did very well. Okay, so that's all the administration stuff out of the way. Are there any questions about that before we keep going? Okay, great. So today, before the break, we'll talk about the first survey, and then we'll talk about consumer perception. Remember, consumer perception is important. Last class, we talked about consumer perceived value as being a key part of CRM. So we'll talk about consumer perception and why that matters. Then we'll break, then we'll do kind of behavioral marketing and the last or the second survey towards the end of class. So customer value, right? Marketing is a process whereby we create value for customers and then kind of extract that value in return. And CRM is customer relations management, right? And what does CRM say? It says that customers buy from the firm that offers the highest customer perceived value, right? So you will buy from the company that gives you kind of the biggest benefit minus cost that are available to you of the options you can choose from, right? Customer perceived value, it's the evaluation of the difference between benefits and costs, right? So you're not necessarily going to buy the lowest cost thing or the thing with the highest benefit. You're going to buy the thing that is kind of the most benefit relative to the cost that it gives, the cost, right? And we had this 5-step process. We also linked this purchase decision-making to the economics of kind of demand, which is derived from this utility maximization framework. But all of this was sort of an idea of rational behavior, right? Consumers behave rationally, but perceived value is something that might not even be known by the customer, right? They might not know themselves what is their perceived value, just to say that perceived value can be manipulated, right? A customer might perceive something to be more valuable depending on how you kind of present it to them. And that's what we're going to talk about for the next few slides. So here's an example of 2 menus for a smoothie, right? So on the left, we see menu 1. There's 2 sizes, small for $2.75 and large for $5.75. And then on the right menu, same price for the large smoothie, but the small smoothie is now more expensive, okay? So nothing has changed about the large smoothie, but the small one has become more expensive on menu 2 relative to menu 1, right? So this is a common pricing strategy, which is called taking advantage of a behavioral bias called price anchoring. So the idea of price anchoring is the first price that the consumer is exposed to can serve as a reference point that affects the perception of other prices, okay? What does that mean? So when we look at menu 1, we can see the small smoothie is only $2.75, and going from the small to the large, it's quite a big increase in cost, right? On that menu, we might perceive the large to not be a very good deal. Whereas on the right menu, we can see the small is $5, and then you can get a large by only paying a little bit more. On the right menu, we might perceive the large to be a really good deal, right? So if we're interested in customers who are thinking about buying the large smoothie, the right menu kind of suggests, more customers might buy the large if they look at the right menu, because they might think that it's a better deal, right? They might perceive it to be a better deal, right? So in this setting, everything I've said sounds reasonable, but I've said that price anchoring is a bias. It's a behavioral bias, okay? Behavioral bias means that it's a different behavior than what we would expect if a consumer was behaving rationally, right? If a consumer was simply, looking at all the options, thinking about all the benefits and all the costs, and then picking the one that gave them the highest customer perceived value, the biggest benefits relative to costs. Here, we can see that for the large smoothie, nothing has changed from the left menu to the right menu for that smoothie, right? The price is the same, the size is the same. But on the second menu, we can imagine people are going to buy the large smoothie more often, right? Now, why would that be the case if it presents the same sort of true value proposition on both menus, right? It's because this price anchoring is kind of leading people to think, oh, actually it feels like a better deal when I see it compared to the small on the right menu versus on the left, right? So in theory, the value that you put on the large smoothie shouldn't depend on the price of the small smoothie, right? The benefits that the large smoothie gives you in terms of how refreshing or tasty or whatever it is, that's the same, right? That shouldn't depend on the price of the small smoothie. But somehow we have this sense that you would buy more large smoothies if you saw the menu on the right, right? So is this actually kind of true in practice? So the survey this week, there were 2 surveys. So 3A was kind of this little one where I just asked you if you'd buy something or not, okay? And there were a bunch of different surveys. So I'm going to show 2 surveys that some of you saw. So the first survey is you're considering buying an Apple Watch. When you walk into the store, you see they have 2 varieties, basic watch for $309, premium watch for $359. Premium has more features, slightly better materials. So it's a higher quality product, right? It makes sense. It's more money. And they tell you in store the basic watch is out of stock and ask you, would you buy the premium watch? And you say yes or no, right? Some other of you saw this example, right? You're considering buying an Apple Watch. Same thing. There's a basic and a premium, but the basic is now a lot cheaper, $259 instead of $309, and the premium is $359. Okay, so nothing's changed about the premium watch across these 2 examples, and the basic watch is still out of stock. Right? So what do you guys think in terms of the responses? For survey, the top survey, how many people do you think chose to buy the premium watch? What fraction of people? 70, 80? Yeah, majority. So it was about 2/3, right? So 2/3 chose to buy in the top example. And then what about the bottom example? What share of people do you think chose to buy the premium watch? Yeah, so I'm seeing a lot lower. That is exactly what happened. Okay. So this is kind of like the price anchoring phenomenon in practice, right? What happened here is that I gave an option, the basic watch, which you can't even buy, right? It's not even available, but I told you the price of it. And that price kind of gave you a different feeling for how much kind of value the premium watch gives, right? Because across both surveys, nothing changed about the premium watch, right? It was described exactly the same way, same price, right? So these biases are definitely kind of, there's something that we pay attention to, not just theoretically, but in practice, right? They appear in people's purchase decisions. So before we move on from this example, let me ask you guys, so I ran this survey. So I was trying to answer a causal question, which is what's the effect of the price anchoring, or what's the price anchoring's effect on people's willingness to buy the premium watch, right? What kind of data did I gather here? Good, primary data. So I gathered this data to answer this question. Perfect. What else? What kind of preferences did I get information about? Yeah, stated preferences. What's a stated preference? If people say they'll do something, then I take that as the truth, versus revealed preference, right? What people actually do, right? So I have stated preference data, primary data. It's a survey. Yeah, perfect. And it's experimental, right? Some of you got one option, others of you got another option. Some of you also got some different options because I was just playing to see what would happen. But the options were kind of randomized. So we have primary, experimental, survey data about stated preferences. And does it help me answer my research question? Yes. Price anchoring does affect the number of people who buy the premium watch. What decision should I make from that? Probably, or one option would be, yeah, I would want to do some kind of price anchoring strategy when I set my prices. So just to wrap up, in this example, the premium watch may seem like a worse deal if the entry model is much cheaper than if the entry model is only a little bit cheaper, right? And why is this a behavioral bias? Again, because the price of the cheaper option shouldn't affect how you value the benefits of the more expensive option, right? And the price of the more expensive option stayed the same. But this price anchoring changed how people kind of declared their purchases. So that's one bias, or that's one kind of element of price anchoring. So here's another example, and we often see this in practice, right? I imagine all of you have kind of seen price tags that look like the one on the left, and you've also seen price tags that look like the one on the right. And in principle, consumer demand for the product, it shouldn't matter what price tag is used. But we kind of know that that's not true, right? Which of these products or which of these price tags do you think would lead to more sales of the product? Yeah, perfect. So this is a situation of price anchoring kind of going in the other direction, right? Where it's like, I see this product and it looks like it would be super valuable, $119.99. Actually, it's discounted, so I kind of perceive that to be a better deal, right? And, we see this in a lot of experiments, in a lot of data. Yes, people are more likely to buy the one on the right. The price that people are willing to pay is kind of anchored to a crossed out reference price that they see first, right? And again, this is a behavioral bias, right? The benefits of the products that you kind of can perceive shouldn't have anything to do with this reference price that's crossed out, right? All you care about is like, what benefits does this give me and what price do I pay, right? In theory, that's how you should behave kind of rationally, but it's just not true, right? You do pay attention to reference prices and use it to construct your perceived value for the product. So if $119 is not the sort of ordinary selling price, it would be illegal to kind of use this label in Canada. So there's some kind of consumer protection laws to keep companies from doing fake sales. But there's still places where this kind of thing is common. So actually, let's continue looking at this. So apart from the price anchoring, what else do you kind of notice about these prices that's fairly common to see? Yeah, 99 cents, right? They both end in 99, right? Most of the time, prices that we see, especially at stores, like when we're doing kind of shopping in a physical location, ends in a 9, right? And again, this is a behavioral bias. Consumers tend to ignore the last digit of a number, tend to focus on the first digit, right? So firms set the last digit as high as possible and the first digit as small as possible, right? So, you see this all the time at gas stations as well, right? This is an illustration of the fact that these biases, they exist, but they also affect how firms' strategies are deployed, right? Firm strategies are reflections of the cognitive biases of the consumers that they serve. So maybe here's something more practical for you guys too. There's also this sort of left number bias when we're buying used cars. Okay, so here's a researcher who's at UTM, Nico Lassetera and his co-authors. And what they find is when you're buying a used car, one thing you pay attention to is how many kilometers are on the car, right? How far has the car been driven? And the more kilometers it's been driven, the cheaper the car should be because it's kind of more used, right? So they kind of did this analysis where they looked at the value, the purchase price of used cars. They said, okay, suppose, what they found is suppose you have a car and it's 79,850 kilometers. You drive your car another 100 kilometers, and that'll reduce the car's market value, so what you could sell it in a used car dealership, by about $10. Okay, so yeah, you've driven it more, it's worth a little bit less, it's a bit more used. If you drive it a little bit more than that, so that you go from 79,950 to 80,050, so again, just another 100 kilometers, that will on average reduce the market value by about $210. Right? So the more you drive, the cheaper the car is getting. But there's an especially big jump when the amount of kilometers you've driven goes over kind of a big threshold, right? Even if you've only driven a little bit more. So, how is this useful? Well, it's another example of this perceptual bias, right? And, if you're buying a used car, if you kind of look for one that's just over, a big milestone, potentially it'll be a much better deal than one that's just below a big milestone. Okay. All right, cool. So can you sort of think of a situation? So we see a lot of 9.9s when we look at prices, but sometimes we don't, right? Can you guys think of examples where you look at a price or at stores or brands where the price doesn't end in 9.9? Okay, Dollarama. That's one example. Luxury goods, flight tickets, Apple products. Seen a lot of Holt Renfrew, some strong brand loyalty for Holt Renfrew. Expensive products. Yeah, so it's sometimes the case, not always. You can think of the Dollarama, but sometimes when you have luxury products, they don't use this 9.9 strategy, right? And why would a luxury product not use the 9.9 strategy? Yeah, 99 makes it seem like the product is less expensive, right? If something's $199, that seems less expensive than 200, right? People who can afford those things don't really care. Yeah, so when you're thinking about buying a luxury product, sometimes the point is not to save money when you buy it, right? The point is to have the feeling that this is something very high quality, that this is something very expensive, right? That kind of brand reputation, right? Also called conspicuous consumption, right? So you can maybe sort of mimic a luxury feeling for a product if you avoid this 9.9 strategy, which is designed to make something seem cheaper. If you just round it up, makes it sort of seem higher quality, more expensive, right? So, we kind of see different strategies even within kind of a narrow industry. So on the left, we have a menu for different breakfast options. We have eggs Benedict, 2 eggs, English muffin. On the right, we have a different menu for a different breakfast restaurant, same product, eggs Benedict. And the one on the left, we kind of have the 99 strategy being employed. The one on the right, not so much, Okay, so in this case, these two restaurants, it does correspond to the one on the left is positioning themselves, they're a chain restaurant and they're trying to attract families, right? So potentially more value conscious people. And then on the right is kind of a fancier restaurant located in an area where not a lot of families, potentially trying to attract people who are maybe more more interested in kind of the luxury portrayal, right? Okay, so those kind of price anchoring and price perceptions. So now we're going to look at some additional perceptual biases. So here we have an experiment run by a behavioral economist, Dan Ariely, right? Kind of a very famous guy. He pioneered a lot of the behavioral economics, which is sort of non-rational consumers. And so he ran this experiment in 2008. And he presented two different choice sets. So let's look at the first choice set that he gave to some people in his experiment. What he asked was to pick the type of subscription that you want to buy for this Economist magazine. First option, a subscription to the online only, right? So $59 per year, and you get the online access. Bottom option, you get print and web subscription for $125 per year. So top one is a bit cheaper, you get online only. Bottom one, more expensive, you get online plus print. Right? So what do you guys think? What percent of people who were faced with this choice went for the cheaper option, online only, and what percent went for the more expensive print and web? Yeah. Okay, maybe 50-50, cheaper, 85. Okay, so maybe a slight preference for kind of the cheaper. Yeah, so that's what they found. Like, okay, people seem to opt for the cheaper option a bit more often. The other group of people in the experiment got this choice set. The first option is the same, economist.com subscription, $59. The bottom option is the same as the print and web, $125. But now there's this middle option, print only. So just the print subscription, but it's for $125. And this is clearly a bad option, right? Why is the middle one a bad option? Same price, less value. Yeah, Jie Chung says the third one also has online for the same price, right? So why would you ever buy the middle one? You can just buy the third one for the same price and get more stuff. So we would expect that basically almost no one should be buying the middle one, right? Like no one's going to be kind of fooled into that. And so given that the middle one is just kind of like it's an option that no one should care about, it's just bad, we should probably expect the same split of people, right? Introducing this clearly worse option shouldn't change anything about how we evaluate the two options that we actually care about. So we probably would expect 70-30 still, right? Or maybe not. What do you guys think? 50-50 top and bottom? 60-40? Yeah, so maybe you guys are thinking like maybe a slight shift towards the bottom. So here's what actually happened in the experiment. So massive shift to the bottom, massive shift away from the online only to print and web. Yeah, very unexpected. And why is this unexpected, right? Why is this a bias? Because we've introduced this sort of decoy option, which is garbage. No one should care about it. No one does care about it. But somehow having it in there makes people perceive the value of print and web to be higher, right? So this one is extremely powerful, right? Like if you're the economist and you're trying to sell print subscriptions because it's more valuable to you, this is clearly a way to do that, right? And what it's done is it's increased the perceived value of that bottom option. So let's look at another experiment, again, by two kind of pioneers in behavioral economics. And they're asking people to choose between two small refrigerators, okay? So these are like dorm room refrigerators. You have the Panasonic Standard for $179, which is 0.8 cubic feet. And then you have the Emerson for $109, which is 0.5 cubic feet, right? So you have a more expensive option with a bit more space, and then you have a less expensive option with a bit less space, okay? So again, I'll ask you guys, what do you think in terms of how many people buy each of these options? Which share of people buy this Panasonic and what share buys the Emerson? Yeah, so 40, 60, 30, 70. So yeah, maybe people kind of slightly like the cheaper one more, which is true. So it's about, yeah, 40, 60. Okay, fine. So like people like the cheaper one a little bit better. New menu. So the Panasonic Standard and the Emerson have stayed the same. There's no difference with the pricing or with the sale price or with the size. But now there's a new option, the Deluxe, right? 1.1 cubic feet, so it's the biggest, $199, so it's the most expensive. So what would we expect to happen? So if you used to be buying the Emerson, does this new option change your feelings, right? Does this new option change what's kind of valuable to you, right? Because before you didn't buy the middle one, you didn't buy the more expensive one. So why should you care about an even more expensive one, right?
Prof, I think you're muted.
I'm muted. Can everyone hear me okay? Thumbs up or in chat, good. Okay, yeah, Ariane, maybe check your speakers. Okay, so so Isabel says maybe they'll choose the Standard. So, okay, some people will still choose the Standard, but who should choose the Deluxe? Probably only people who used to be choosing the Standard, right? There might be some people choosing the Standard who decide to switch because, before they were buying the biggest thing and now they see there's an even bigger, so they might buy that. But we kind of don't expect people from the Emerson to switch, right? But they do, okay? So we can see, Emerson drops from 57 down to 27. So we lose 30% of customers. So some of them go to the Panasonic Standard, and then some of them actually, it looks like the Panasonic Deluxe has increased as well, right? So we don't know kind of who went where. But what we can say is that somehow introducing an even more expensive option convinced people who were buying the cheapest option that now the Standard is actually better value somehow. And again, why is that a bias? Well, it's because if you were buying the cheapest one before, you shouldn't really care if there's now like an even more expensive, sort of more luxurious product, right? You were buying the cheapest one before, why would you kind of switch? Because now there's something even more out of your price range. But people do switch, right? So this is another perceptual bias. So the last one was called the decoy effect. And this one's called the compromise effect, and we'll kind of review those in a few slides. Okay. Dora says Standard is more value once you compare it to Deluxe. So actually, if you do the math on these and you look at like cubic feet per dollar, that might be interesting to see which one kind of comes out ahead, right? Maybe that's what you're interested in, right? How much space am I getting per dollar? All right, it says, why would they perceive that it gives more value? Great question. We see that they do perceive it gives more value, right? Because more of them buy it. Why do they perceive that it gives more value? So why kind of psychologically, and that's kind of honestly something that people are still coming up with theories for, based on some of the most recent theories are based on how the brain works, right? So they think that people's brains are kind of wired to choose a middle option, to kind of see it as like a more balanced or reasonable thing if you're given kind of an array of choices to kind of go with the middle one, right? Now, why should your brain work like that? Not sure, right? In this kind of lecture, we're looking at these phenomenon, but in terms of why do they occur? We'll talk a bit about the why of the endowment effect. But for some of these, actually, yeah, the answer is we have theories, but we don't have anything concrete. All right, so a little bit more. So here I have a video. And let me share sound. All right, so I'm going to play this video.
This is an awareness test.
Did all of you just hear a guy say, this is an awareness test? Yes? Okay, perfect.
How many passes does the team in white make?
Go!
The answer is 13. But did you see the moonwalking bear?
Go!
All right. So yeah, probably some of you have already seen that video. But if you haven't, it's actually based on a research paper where people were studying, do people perceive things that they're not really looking for? The answer is a lot of people don't, right? Almost half of people don't notice kind of the invisible guy walking through the middle. So one lesson here for marketers is that consumers will often only pay attention to things that they're looking for, right? And we talked a bit about this last class, right? Things, brands, products that are in your choice or you're in your consideration set, that's what you focus on. And all the other possible choices you can make, oftentimes you just ignore, right? So we've now talked about kind of these two context effects, the decoy effect, which is what we saw with the economist example. Consumers tend to prefer a product if it's presented alongside a decoy option that is unambiguously worse. The compromise effect was consumers tend to prefer a product if it's presented as a compromise or kind of a middle option in the set of alternatives. Again, why are these perceptual biases? Because how you show a product shouldn't affect how you value it, right? How the marketer shows it to you shouldn't affect how the consumer values the product, but it does, right? It changes how we perceive the value. And obviously we can see that there's tons of applications there for how you should present products in order to get people to have the highest perceived value possible, which, like we talked about last class, will help attract consumers. So the next thing I'm going to do is show you a slide, and I want you to look at it for 5 seconds, and then I'll ask you a few questions about it. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so now I'll ask you, how many of you remember the word log? How many of you remember seeing the word log? Yes, yeah, okay, mostly yes. How many of you remember seeing the word car? Good amount of car. How about the word cow? How many of you remember seeing the word cow? Okay, and how many of you remember seeing the word cat? Okay, so let's take a look. So log sticks out, right? Most of us remembered that one. Car is right next to log. So a lot of you remembered car, and it was kind of close to something that was quite distinctive, right? What about cow? So cow's at the top, and it also appears twice. So there's lots of cow out there, right? And then cat. Yeah, there's no cat, right? So we remember sometimes things that aren't there, right? We also remember things that are distinctive or that appear close to something distinctive, right? So let's take a look at how that's used in marketing. So on the left, there's a brand that some of you might be familiar with called Mountain Dew, right? So it's kind of a citrus carbonated drink, and it's got very distinctive branding. Then on the right, we see some other cans of soda, okay? So Mountain Dew is kind of a known brand, and we kind of know, maybe you've tasted that before. And if you have, you kind of know, all right, and you know what to expect when you have it, right? So Mountain Dew is log, right? Mountain Dew is the thing that sticks out. And what about these things on the right? The strategy here is to imitate, right? When we look at these other cans, Mountain W, Mountain Explosion, what would we expect them to taste like? Yeah, similar, maybe even the same. So basically it should taste like Mountain Dew, right? And why do we infer that? Because it looks really similar. It's got kind of a similar name, right? So if you're one of these beverages, if Mountain Dew is there and then all the other mountain drinks are there, why not give yourself a red can? Why not stand out? Do you think it's a good idea for them to imitate? Or should they try to stand out more? Yeah. So it seems like, they're all choosing to imitate. So we can say like, yeah, imitation is probably a good strategy because they're all doing it. People might not accept the new one. People might not be able to infer that it tastes like Mountain Dew if it doesn't look like Mountain Dew, right? When people don't see Mountain Dew on the shelf, they can go for one of these. Even if they do see Mountain Dew on the shelf, these are close by and they look really similar. And so maybe if the price is lower, consumers might just pick them up because it looks like a better value, right? So this is these are all like car, right? These are all kind of imitating log, like by being close to it. Yeah, it's really hard to change consumers' habits. I don't know if anyone really likes the taste of Mountain Explosion, but some people like the taste of Mountain Dew, right? And so if all they're focused on is Mountain Dew, then you really want to make something that looks close enough that they might consider it as well, right? So imitation here. And another reason not to do a red can is because people might get the wrong idea, right? Here's a drink with a red can, very different flavor. And we see, again, like a lot of imitators who are using similar color, similar kind of labeling, right? Okay. It doesn't just apply to kind of inexpensive products. So this mattress is a Casper mattress, which was a very popular order through the mail mattress that will be delivered to your home. It's supposed to be very comfortable. And they were kind of a big disruptor in the mattress industry, which is actually quite a large industry. Okay. And they spawned imitators, right? So other people imitated the look because they wanted people to infer that their mattress would be as comfortable and as convenient for delivery. So Aaron asks, can we say that these other brands are fake? It's a good question. So I would say no, they're not fake, in the sense that they're not literally like, like trying to pretend that they're Dr. Pepper. They're clearly like they're different enough that Dr. Pepper won't be able to sue them or pursue legal action. But they're similar enough that consumers will get the right idea when they're picking them out. Yeah. So it's definitely a marketing strategy. And kind of the lesson or the trade-off I want you guys to be thinking about right now is like, when is it good to imitate versus stand out, right? And lastly, we do see kind of it's not like a global phenomenon that like everyone imitates the global market leader, right? So on the top, we have a bunch of North American water bottle brands. These all look kind of similar, right? They look similar to the market leader, which is Dasani, which is, they're blue. Maybe they're supposed to look refreshing, something like that. On the bottom, we have a bunch of leading bottled water brands from China, with I think the market leader in the bottom left, Nongfu Springs. And now we have, brands trying to imitate that market leader, right? Nongfu Springs has a red label. So you do see a lot more red labels for the water bottles in that market, right? So when we think about this phenomenon of imitation versus differentiation, we can look back at this slide that I showed you last class on deodorants, right? So here we see there's a ton of different deodorant options. So when is it good to stick out and when is it good to imitate? So there's a distinction you should make if there's a lot of different products in that product category, or if there's only a few products, right? If there are many products in the category, then if you're kind of a new product, you probably want to imitate, right? Because if there's many products, people already have their consideration set that they've decided on. And if that includes Mountain Dew and you want to be included in that consideration set, you should imitate Mountain Dew so that people will consider you, right? If there's so many products, you want to imitate someone who's already a market leader. If there's only a few products, then differentiating yourself, kind of sticking out a bit so that when consumers consider you kind of the few products that they kind of have in their choice set, they end up choosing or at least looking at your product. So many products, probably better to imitate, right? Doesn't imitation harm your brand by making it forgettable? It can, right? But if you are not a market leader, then your first priority is to get consumers to consider you, right? If you do have like a very new value proposition, then probably you want to differentiate, right? If you're providing value in a way, right, that is not like any other product on the market, right? A totally new flavor, a totally new delivery method, something like that, probably better to differentiate. So if you have something that really makes you special, yeah, differentiate. If you kind of look like other products and your value proposition is that you're cheaper or just slightly better in some small way, probably better to imitate. Okay. It's also the distinction between how you perceive your customers. Do your customers already have a brand in mind, right? Do they have something that they know what they're looking for? If they know what they're looking for, then your product is kind of like the invisible bear, right? People aren't going to even be looking at it. They're not going to consider it. So if you're in a market where consumers are extremely brand loyal, right? They don't consider much, then you should definitely imitate. When you look at this big wall of deodorants, does it make you excited to go and buy one? Does this make you feel like, yeah, this would be a fun choice? No, what does it make you feel? Discombobulated, nice. Hard to choose, confused, headache. It's too much. Hard to choose. Yeah. It's a phenomenon of choice overload. So usually we think more choice is better. But yeah, if you have too many options, you may be less happy with your choice. We'll talk about that in a sec. And you also may just be less likely to pick something, period, because it's just overwhelming, right? Here you have a lot of jams to pick from. So these researchers ran an experiment where buyers are offered samples of the jam and then given discount coupons, right? So, and they gave people the option to taste the jam. So when there were only 6 jams available, about 40% of consumers tasted one, and then 30% purchased. So that's pretty good conversion rate. Okay, let's give them more choices. When there's 24 jams available, a lot more tasted, but a lot fewer purchased, right? So how do we understand this result? Choosing between too many options is costly. What's costly about it? Weighing alternatives is costly, right? Is this one better for my dollar than that one? And then what about the other 22 jams, right? It's difficult to weigh them all and figure out which one you like the best. Also, and this goes to what Jeremy is saying, too many options make you less happy with your choice. People tend to feel regret if they don't think they got the best thing, right? When there's 24 jams and you haven't tasted all of them, you're probably going to think, well, I don't even know if I found the best one, right? Even if I buy one, there might have been one that I liked better. And so to minimize that feeling of regret, you end up not buying anything. Okay. Okay, cool. So let's take a break. It's 2:02. So let's break until 2:12. And then we'll talk more and do the last survey. And I'll stay in chat. All right, let's keep going. So we'll finish up our discussion of perception. So Apple is one of the most successful companies in the world by a lot of measures. Market capitalization, right? It's the most valuable kind of company on the stock market. In terms of brand value, it's globally recognized. So a lot of people have asked the question, why is Apple successful? And, we can look back in time and see, was it always successful? And the answer is no. Right? Apple in the 1990s was going bankrupt, but they kind of turned things around, right? Now, why did they turn things around? Why did they become so successful? There's a ton of reasons, but we can kind of go to some of the direct sources and see. So Howhan says Steve Jobs. Yeah, it could be Steve Jobs, right? The theory that kind of just like, one person, one genius person, genius marketer, genius product designer can turn it all around. So Steve Jobs has his book, and you can read it. Here's from another Apple insider. So this is Ken Segal, creative director at Apple. So he's responsible for the creative design, the aesthetics. And he says simplicity isn't just a design principle at Apple, it's a value that permeates every level of the organization. The obsession with simplicity is what separates Apple from other technology companies, and it's what helped Apple recover and then from bankruptcy in the 1990s to become the most valuable company on earth. Okay, so when he says simplicity, what does this mean? Simplicity. So when you think about the product choices in an Apple store compared to, say, PCs or Androids, right? What's kind of a main difference? Clear. Less is more. Clear and easy system. So the operating system is clear. It's Apple system. So maybe the Apple ecosystem is very simple. Everything works together, right? iOS, right? So everything in the ecosystem kind of integrates, right? Are there more Apple product options compared to Android or fewer? Yeah, a lot fewer. So when you're making your choice, you're only choosing between a few options, right? Even the number of phones that they have is not very big, especially compared to Android, right? So simplicity seems to be something that they believe in, right? That they kind of want to reduce the number of choices, reduce the number of decisions that customers have to make when they engage with the brand, right? So this kind of idea that simplicity is useful from a marketing point of view in terms of creating value for customers is not unique to Apple. And the idea that driving repeat purchasing is a key thing we want to do, right? That's one of our key CRM measures, customer retention, and decision simplicity is important for that, right? The ease with which consumers can gather information about a product and confidently and efficiently weigh their purchase options, right? So what they want is simplicity, right? What consumers want. So you can tie that back to this choice overload, where giving people more options sometimes makes them feel worse and less likely to buy, right? So you can also think that giving consumers fewer options allows them to pick the best one, to be confident that they have the best one, and also to sort of not feel overwhelmed when they come back to buy again, right? Because they can kind of see that everything new they're going to buy will work well with everything that they had before. So simplicity is good. Okay, removes choice overload, keeps people's choice consideration set small. Is it always better? Of course, no. Sometimes having something more simple is worse. So some researchers looked at this in the context of restaurants, right? Sometimes having more description on the same product. So for this fish fillet, having it be a succulent Italian fish fillet will generate more positive comments, will lead consumers to think more favorably about it compared to if it's just called a fish fillet, right? So, you can, this is very prevalent with food, right? So fresh cheese, aged cheese, that all sounds better than just cheese, right? Simplicity doesn't always help. And yeah, here's kind of a context where that's true, right? Some people are willing to pay a higher price for a menu item with a more fancy name, right? So why does adding extra descriptive labels have this effect on consumers? So you can think about it as maybe evoking certain feelings in the consumers, right? So giving these words, succulent Italian fish fillet, gives people more to imagine. And if you almost always trying to use positive words so that it'll generate sort of a positive relationship. We can kind of see that in two other studies. So here's a study where subjects are asked to watch and evaluate a cartoon while holding a pen in their mouth. So this is an experiment. So we have some subjects are in group A and some are in group B. And in group A, subjects have to hold the pen kind of clamped between their teeth like this. And in group B, they grasp the pen with pursed lips as if they're puffing on a cigarette. They watch the cartoon holding the pen in their mouth. Who rates the cartoon more favorably? Which group? So when I saw this, I'm like, well, that shouldn't matter at all, right? Like, why would it affect how people rate the thing they're watching? So it actually ends up being group A. So for group A, the kind of theory is, well, they do end up rating it more favorably. The theory is that this kind of simulates a smile, right? It forces them to kind of keep their mouth in sort of the position of a smile. And that actually leads people to have a positive, more positive feeling towards the cartoon. Second one, very similar idea, listen to an editorial. So like a news opinion on headphones, and you're instructed to shake their head while listening to the editorial. So you can shake your head left to right like this, or you can shake your head up and down and like this, and you're kind of randomly told what to do. And then at the end, you're asked, do you agree with the content of the editorial? So do you agree with this opinion or do you not agree, right? So who agrees more? Yeah, up and down, right? Because this feels like nodding, right? This feels like you're already agreeing, right? And that's enough to kind of get people to feel more positively about this opinion, right? So what are the implications here? Bright colors, descriptive words, smiling, happy people, cheerful, positive music, all the things that give people a positive association will let them perceive the value of what they're engaged with more as better, right? As more valuable, right? So to kind of wrap up, we have all these different types of perceptual biases. So we have the different pricing strategies, right? So we saw price anchoring and the left-hand number bias, where people pay most attention to the left-hand number and the least attention to the right-hand number in a price. You have the context effects, which were really quite strong, right? Decoy effects, compromise effects. And then we looked at sort of differentiation versus imitation, right? How you perceive the value of something that looks similar to a brand that you already know about versus something that's quite distinct. Talked a little bit about choice overload and how simplicity is sort of a remedy to that. And then how we value products can be manipulated by associating the product with a certain feeling, right? Even if the product doesn't actually give you that feeling, by somehow forcing you to associate with that feeling, it can make you value the product more. So in the first half of the lecture, we've basically covered a lot of different ways to increase customer perceived value, right? And what does that do? It increases attraction, right? It increases new customers coming to our product. Is there a downside? Yes, right? We'll look at that in a few slides. But remember, the other thing we're trying to do is retain customers. So the question is, if we really increase perceived value before someone buys something, is that also a good way to keep customers buying over and over again? And we'll talk about that in a bit. So here's an example that we'll come back to at the end of the lecture. So Abercrombie & Fitch is a clothing company. And let me finish this example. I'll answer Jeremy's question. So Abercrombie & Fitch is a clothing company and they want to open a store at a new mall. So you can see on kind of the bottom part, all these stores have already picked their locations. We have Apple, Cinnabon, whatever. And then Abercrombie & Fitch is choosing between the top 5 locations, right? So the question is, which store location would they like to choose? Do we have a sense at this point of if it matters or not? Maybe like, so I see people choosing D, and maybe that's like being close to Foot Locker, right? Which is another clothing store. So maybe there's something there about like imitation or kind of locating in the same place. People looking for Foot Locker would then also see Abercrombie & Fitch and maybe consider that too. So actually they have like a very strong position that they take on where they want to go. And we'll sort of reach that conclusion by the end of the lecture. All right, so Jeremy's question was, let's go back up. Does quantity available also change customer perceptions, right? If it's a rare item or not? Definitely, yeah. Actually, we're gonna come back to that in the pricing segment of the lecture. Or sorry, not of this lecture, but in the course when we talk about pricing, we'll come back to that idea of rarity and customer value. But yeah, it definitely does increase customer value, perceived value. Okay, so I asked you guys to read about the endowment effect. So let me kind of cover what that is to refresh your memories. And then we can talk about the survey in a few slides. So here's kind of the original experiment. What happened in this experiment was half of subjects, half of the people in the sample were given a coffee mug and the rest were given a chocolate bar. Okay, so half the people got a mug for free, half the people got a chocolate bar for free. And then all of the subjects were offered a trade. Do you want to trade your mug for the chocolate, right? Talking to the researcher, right? So the researcher says like, I will give you a chocolate bar if you prefer it instead of the mug that you have. If you have a chocolate bar, I'll give you the mug if you prefer it, okay? So one thing that we probably might expect is like, okay, the mug is maybe a bit more valuable than the chocolate bar. So people who get the mug probably don't want to trade, right? And that's true, right? 11% of people who got a mug in this experiment were willing to trade it away, right? So fine. But then the people who got the chocolate bar is actually very similar. So what is going on here? The gifts were given out at random, right? But it seems like about 90% of people just happened to get the gift that they liked better, right? So of all the people who got a mug, only 10% were willing to trade it away. 90% liked the mug better than the chocolate. But then of the people who got the chocolate, and again, that was totally random who got what, those people only 10% were willing to trade. 90% said, I would rather just keep the chocolate. Okay. So how do we explain this phenomenon, right? Yeah, people think that what they're given is better. This is the endowment effect. So the endowment effect is the observation that people place a higher value on an object that they own compared to the value they would place on that same object if they didn't own it. Okay. And this is exactly what we saw in the experiment, right? We gave people some of these random goods and we asked, do you want to trade? And most people don't want to trade. And we find that over and over again in many, many experiments, right? And kind of what you saw in the readings that you did is when you think about this endowment effect, right? And this observation that people place a higher value on something that they own compared to the value that they place on it if they don't own it. We have these two concepts of willingness to pay and willingness to accept. Willingness to pay is, I don't have the object yet. How much am I willing to pay for it? Right? Willingness to accept is, I already have the object. How much am I willing to get paid to part with it, right? To sort of give it away. And for the same objects, people's willingness to pay is always lower than their willingness to accept. The amount that I'm willing to pay for something before I have it is always a lot less than the amount that I'm kind of willing to accept to give it up, right? So I would kind of pay more to avoid losing something that I already have compared to how much I would pay to get something that I don't have yet. And I'll say that again. You're willing to pay more to avoid losing something that you already have compared to the amount you're willing to pay to get something that you don't have yet. That feels like it's a challenge for a marketer, right? It's a challenge. It's a problem. Why? It suggests that a customer's perceived value of a product that you're trying to sell is lower than it would be if they already had it. So customer perceived value is lower for a product they don't have yet compared to if they already have the product, right? So how do you capture that kind of extra perceived value created by the endowment effect? And you're also kind of trying to work, you're sort of working against it, right? Is there anything that a marketer can do to overcome or even capitalize on the endowment effect in their potential customers? Right? So if you want to use the endowment effect, well, one thing is you could give away a product for free, right? Once they have it, then it's worth more to them. But once they have it, you can't charge them for it anymore, right? Bit of a problem. So there's some studies that suggest that factual ownership is not actually necessary to produce an endowment effect. Sensory exposure can produce an endowment effect without actual ownership, okay? So here's a few studies that looked at kind of toys. And the idea is sort of seeing or touching the toy increases your valuation of it. So getting the chance to play with the toy makes you value it more. You're willing to pay more. Why? Because you have the feeling of ownership already. And so if you don't pay, it doesn't feel like you're gaining something if you do pay. It feels like you're losing something that you already have if you don't pay, right? So you pay to avoid the feeling of losing something that you already have. So apart from sensory exposure, we see in digital products a ton of free trials, right? So Apple Music, here they had a promo. It's free for the first 3 months. And in the App Store, lots of products. You can try them before you end up paying for them. So you can do a trial run. Same thing with Amazon. You have free trials, right? So all of these different products, they give you the product for free for a limited time. right? And they can do that because it's a digital product, so they can kind of take it away again. They can remove your access after a certain amount of time. But they give it to you for free, and then they ask, hey, like, free trial's over, would you like to pay? And now, again, you're paying to avoid losing something that it feels like you already have, right? So the endowment effect is something that marketers use when they're kind of doing free trials. Is there something else going on other than the endowment effect? So when you're given a free trial, you start to value it more because of the endowment effect. Is there any other thing that's happening kind of as you're kind of using the product during your free trial? Or you're sampling it? Yeah, you test the product, you might like it, right? You learn about it. Remember, the best source of information is experience, right? Your own personal experience with the product. So you get to use it, you learn about it, makes you want to continue using it if you end up liking it. So it's the endowment effect and it's experiential information, right? So we also see another kind of free trial format, which is the money back guarantee, right? Both of these products give you the option to trade the product back for the amount of money that you paid for it, right? And in what way could these guarantees be motivated by the endowment effect? Well, maybe someone who doesn't value this French soap says, okay, I'll buy it. I'll pay more than I think it's worth just because, I can always give it back if I don't like it, right? Or if I can always just give it back, period, right? There's no reason not to return it. You have it, and then once you have it, it feels like you have this sense of ownership. And so now kind of the money that you paid maybe starts to feel a bit more worth it, right? Because to give back the product, you get the money that you paid, but now it feels like it's worth more to you than what you paid, right? This feeling of ownership has kicked in. What else does a money back guarantee do other than allow the endowment effect to create value? What if you see a badge like this on a product, what does it tell you about the product? And what does it tell you about the company's belief in their product? Yeah, they think it's good quality, right? Confidence. So this is a strong signal that this is a good product, right? A company wouldn't be willing to give you your money back if they didn't think you'd enjoy it, right? So high quality. It's hard to be effective in using free trials if you don't have a digital product or if customers don't really visit your store. So how can we give people the feeling of ownership if they're not coming into our store and if it's not a digital product? So there's a bunch of different kind of ways, which, you might not think actually work, but they do, right? They do create a sense of ownership. So even just telling someone to imagine themselves. So here's a sweater that says, imagine yourself in a Mercury Capri, which was a car company is no longer in business. But does this sweater work to create an endowment effect, a feeling of ownership for this particular car, right? And researchers have found, yes, very small effect, but the effect is there, right? Even just imagining that you own something is enough to make you feel like if you don't have it, you've lost you've lost something. So here's a colleague of mine at UTM, and he doesn't have Amazon Prime. So when he goes onto Amazon, this is what he sees under his account. So he sees his account, your orders, your wish list, your recommendations, subscribe and save items, and your Prime membership, right? He doesn't have a Prime membership. It also says, manage your devices, your Kindle Unlimited. He doesn't have a Kindle, right? It doesn't have either of these things. What happens when you click your Prime membership and you don't have it? Well, it gives you the prompt to sign up. Does this create an endowment effect? Telling you that something is already yours, is that enough to create a feeling of ownership? The answer is yes. It's very, very small, but for a big company like Amazon with hundreds of millions of subscribers, even increasing that by a little bit, if they can do it at basically no cost, then why not, right? Yeah, this is enough. What about food? So how do you give potential customers the feeling of ownership before a purchase? Samples. Okay. Yeah, so giving free food samples out. So this kind of creates an endowment effect, right? In the sense that you have sensory exposure to the sample. You're given the sample for free though, and once you've eaten it, it's gone, right? So it kind of maybe creates a sense like, oh, like I wish I had a full cookie instead of just the sample cookie. And it does allow you to learn about the sample, but does it give you sort of the feeling of ownership without actually having it yet? So it's debatable. I would say yes, right? It does create an endowment effect feeling. Can we do it without actually giving away food though? Because giving away food is expensive. We'll come back to that by the end of the lecture. Can we create this endowment effect without actually giving away free food? So how do we explain the endowment effect? Why do people value something that they have more compared to the same thing that they don't have? And one theoretical explanation is the phenomenon of the endowment effect is loss aversion. This is the idea that the cost of losing something is larger in magnitude than the benefit of gaining something of equal value. Okay. So when we look at how we explain the endowment effect with loss aversion, we typically bring up this graph. Okay. So what is this graph saying? On the x-axis, we have gains and losses. And you can think about those as like kind of dollar values, right? The dollar value gain and the dollar value of losses. And then this point in the middle is our reference point. That's where we're starting out from. That's where we are right now. As we move to the right, as we gain things, our value does increase, right? So this curve suggests though that as we gain, say, more and more dollars, the value that we place on those isn't always just one for one. It's kind of decreasing over time, right? The more gains you get, it's a diminishing extra benefit from those gains, okay? That's fairly common in economics. And it's kind of uncontroversial, so we have that here. But the key part of this graph is that when we move left from the reference point, this kind of downward part of the curve is steeper. So the losses that we get from the same X change, so starting from a reference point, if we lose X instead of gaining it, the value that we lose is enormous compared to the value we would gain from getting an additional X, right? So losing X hurts us a lot more compared to gaining X. And then once we've lost, then we're down here. That's our new reference point, right? And if we gain our X back from that new reference point, it's not enough to compensate us for having lost it in the first place. Okay. So loss aversion says losses loom larger than gains, right? Losses hurt more than the equivalent gain would help. We see a lot of different framings in advertising that make it feel like you're losing something if you don't buy a product. So here's an advertisement for a cell phone plan, and it says you could be wasting $194 a year on the wrong phone plan. Okay, So this advertisement is basically framing this $194 as, you know, a loss, right? It's not saying you could gain 194 pounds, 194 pounds being the currency here. You could gain, it's not saying you could gain it. It's saying you can avoid losing it if you switch, right? You're losing it, but you could avoid that loss if you switch to our phone plan, right? You see it a lot with medication, right? Get relief, pain relief, relieve pain. It's not you could feel better or you could feel great. It's avoid feeling bad, right? You know, avoid the loss, avoid the pain, right? Same thing here, right? It's not you could, yeah. It's not like you could lose weight. It's like you're kind of gaining these pounds. And that's kind of a loss to you, right? If indeed it is the case. As the New York City sort of Board of Health suggests, that kind of gaining this weight would feel like a loss to you. Okay. So back to customer relations management. Remember our key CRM measures. So Legu says, is it legal since it isn't true? Maybe you can elaborate more on that in the chat and we can come back to it. Sort of which isn't true. So back to customer relations management, our key CRM measures, customer perceived value, which is a customer's subjective evaluation of the difference between all the benefits and the costs of market offering, right? And then customer satisfaction, the difference between the perceived performance of a product and the customer perceived value when it was purchased. And what we try to do is attract customers by creating the sense of a high perceived value, but also retain customers by creating a good enough customer satisfaction that they choose to continue engaging with the product after the first time. So our CRM equation is our customer satisfaction is equal to perceived performance minus CPV. And everything we saw in the first half of the lecture is how to increase CPV, right? And everything we saw with the endowment effect is how do you increase CPV? And when we set CPV too low, that's not good. We're not attracting customers. But when we set CPV too high, which is a real danger when we're really manipulating perceived value in this way, then we could prevent retention, right? If you're setting CPV, if you're making consumers perceive something to be so great, even if it isn't that great, but their perception is increased by the context, by the endowment effect, then you might not keep them after that initial purchase. What's even worse, if you have CPV as your reference point, so that's my expectation for how the product should perform, then once I'm actually using it, if the perceived performance is lower than that expectation, and if consumers have this loss aversion, then they're going to be even more unhappy, right? Because they expected something really good. Not getting that good thing, having actually performed quite badly, makes it feel like they've lost something, right? And that's not a good recipe for having them come back and buy again. Okay, and now that kind of brings us to the survey. So we talked about the endowment effect, and that was kind of a motivating thought for this survey. So let's read it through together again. Spotify is a music listening app, music streaming service. They have a free version and a premium version. Spotify free users have ads. They can't pick particular songs to listen to. You can only skip a few songs per hour. Premium users pay a fee and they can avoid all those bad things. They listen without limitation, okay? And Spotify is thinking about promotions to increase adoption of the premium version. And again, there's no right answer here. So this is kind of how you guys split in terms of what to do. This is a very real question for Spotify. Spotify has never been profitable. And last year was their least profitable year ever. I think they lost something like $500 million. Spotify needs more premium users, or they need to be selling more ads. But what they would like is more premium users. So really, of their kind of 350 or 400 million users, about half are free. How do they get those free users to convert to premium? That's what we're trying to figure out. That's what we're contemplating. So let me ask a few of you what you thought. So starting with offering 1 month of free skips. So let me ask I think Albert is here, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. So the reason I choose this offer 1 month of free skips is that so some of the customers may don't touch our brand or products right before. So if we offer one trial for them to use, they may feel if it's worthy to continue to use, or for maybe try to use more forever maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just
So you're thinking
loyalty.
they would it's a learning experience for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, cool. All right. Thanks, Albert. Does anyone want to kind of add to Albert's response on why they chose free skips as the promotional choice, as the promotional strategy? Why free skips? Maybe someone who chose it. Oh yeah, okay, it's Zishun.
So in this case, I recognize the factors that motivate free users to premium users is the free skips, and since users are able to pick songs to listen in some sense for this free skips, so besides, it was also asking the most cost effective one. So free skips can be achieved through programming, and yeah, that's it.
Okay, so you said cost effective. Do you know how much Spotify makes from, say, like a month of ads for a free user?
No idea.
No idea. Does anyone know? You can enter in chat if you do. How much does Spotify make from a month of free ads? About $7. Yeah, that's kind of what I found too. So you're giving up $7 of revenue to kind of give them this 1 month of free skips. And then, it's this experiential thing. Like Albert said, and there's also the endowment effect feeling, right? You like the feeling of having free skips. And once your free trial of that is over, then not having them anymore feels like a loss, right? So then maybe you're more willing to upgrade your Spotify to premium. Okay, so now let me ask someone who decided ad-free instead of free skips. So these two options were like somewhat similar. So let's see, is CJ Lee here?
Hello, Professor.
Hey, yeah, we can hear you.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. So the reason I chose offering a free ad is more effective is because loss looms more than gains, and I feel like the advertisement in Spotify is relatively more annoying than you don't have the ability to skip over songs,
Mm.
And essentially, I think all the songs in your library are the songs that you like. So it's not that you have to skip over certain songs, but commercials is a different story.
That's a great point. Yeah, very good. So the ad-free ads are, just kind of more annoying, and the loss of ad-free would feel worse than the loss of free skips because, most people don't use all of their skips anyway. It's the thought. Yeah. Okay, cool. So, all right, that's a great answer, and it kind of justifies why you chose the ad-free instead of the free skips. Does anyone want to add to CG's thoughts on the ad free, especially as it regards to like ad free versus free skips? I do think that it would have a bigger effect on conversions. Obviously, it is a bit more expensive, right? $5, but you would make that back, right? Yeah. So, or sorry, Spotify loses about $7 from that month of ads. But you know, if you get more conversions, then you would make that back pretty quickly. Yeah, Haya.
Yeah, I also chose the ad free for a month because I feel like even in the free version, they can make their own playlists. So they can choose a playlist and put only songs that they want to listen to. But the ads, they have zero control over. So if you give them a month of ad free and they experience listening to music that easily and nicely, and they can like really vibe with their songs, if that's the correct word, then when the month ends and they start getting ads, it's a lot more irritating. And then it like urges them to buy the premium subscription more.
That's a great thought. So not only do you lose just the ad-free listening, but playlists that you made while you were ad-free now might just not be as good, right? If the songs like they don't transition anymore, they just get chopped up by ads. So that could also feel like an extra loss, right? You don't get to enjoy these things you created. Great, really good point. Really good point. Right, so we'll come to the last option, emailing users a gift card for the Nest. And then you can only claim it if you sign up for premium. Yeah, Boyan.
Yeah, sure. I kind of want to add like something on this option. So I was actually kind of surprised that not a lot of people choose this because like personally, I'm actually on one of the Google Nest Mini, and I found it works like almost perfect with Spotify. So what the reason I chose this like option was because like so like once like they sign up for like Spotify Prime, right? And they would like get a gift card for the Google Nest. And I was thinking because like some of the competitives compared to the Spotify Prime are a lot like Apple Music and Amazon Music and YouTube Music and even Apple Music, right? So Apple Music like combines with it has the option to purchase it by itself, and it works seamlessly with the Apple ecosystem. And you also can buy the bundle called probably like Apple One something. It combines with iCloud and all the other options at Apple TV. And YouTube Music combines with YouTube Prime. And if you purchase YouTube Prime, you will get ads free, and you will also get YouTube Music by itself. And Amazon Music comes with Amazon Prime. And if you purchase Amazon, if you buy a lot of stuff on Amazon, you will just get this option. However, one of the interesting thing I found was I actually own another device called made from Bose. It's called like Bose Home Speaker 500, and this is a smart speaker that supports a voice assistant like Google Assistant or Alexa, and you have the option to sign up for Spotify. However, this Bose speaker, I think it has some kind of contract with Spotify, and whenever I'm asking Google to play any kind of music, it can only be played from Spotify if I'm using this Bose speaker. However, if I'm using the Google Nest speaker, I can do it from neither probably YouTube Music or Spotify. So that's kind of interesting. And so the originally when I was choosing this option, I was thinking like just like the other music lover, if you are having an additional Google Nest Mini speaker, it would complete the like how I would say it, the experience of like having the Spotify Prime like music service, I would say. So I think this
that's a great. I'm gonna cut you off there. Sorry, but
no
I think this is really good good insight. So not only should we be thinking about this sort of endowment effect, but Spotify and the Google Nest work well together. With kind of the Google Nest, you're now sort of more in the Spotify ecosystem. I know you do have YouTube Music, but Spotify works so well with Google products versus, you know, if you have the Apple HomePod or if you have Alexa, you might be kind of in another ecosystem. So getting the Nest kind of reinforces that you'll maybe stick with Spotify. And then there's also the endowment effect on top of that. So I think that's a great point.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So let me, I see, Joey, when you have your hand up, but to just finish off the class. So maybe we'll come back to you next class for your answer. So let's kind of finish up. These were all really good, great discussion. I'll send it to Spotify. So here, we do see firms using the endowment effect as like part of their marketing strategy. So here we have Disney, and they estimate how long does it take for you to wait to get onto the ride at the Disney resort, right? And Disney almost always, what do? They overestimate wait times, right? They choose option C. They say, oh, it's going to be a 120 minutes wait, and then it's actually a lot less, right? Why? So that their customers are pleasantly surprised when they get onto the ride ahead of schedule. So they create the expectation that it's going to be worse than it actually is, so that when kind of they actually get on the ride, they feel like the performance is better than their expectations, right? Why? Because they're trying to avoid that loss, right? If the expectation is there and people wait longer, then that really, really hurts, right? So they're just trying to avoid the loss, right? Or they might want customers to buy the fast passes. That's a great point. So they've been doing this for a while, even pre-fast pass, but having a fast pass, so having the ability to purchase to skip the line or to go to an even shorter line, it works well together with this strategy that they already have. So yeah, we talked about reference points in the endowment effect. So sensory experiences, we've said, can produce the endowment effect without actually owning something, right? Can make you feel like you already own it, right? We saw with like this watch, with playing with the toy, with Apple Music. So you're not actually convinced that you own the thing, right? You're not fooled into thinking, oh, this toy is actually mine. But the sensory experience kind of operates on a subconscious level, right? It allows you to sort of feel in some way, not rationally, but at some deeper level, that you already have this thing, right? And anything that's kind of operating through your senses is a way of maybe triggering the endowment effect. So that kind of brings us to our last example, or rather our first example of Abercrombie and Fitch, right? So the sense of smell is kind of a direct line into your brain, and it really can trigger some subconscious feelings. So it's used in marketing, of course, right? Here's a company that puts chocolate scents on 33 vending machines in factory break rooms, and it increases the sales of the chocolate from the vending machines, right? Just smelling the chocolate makes it feel maybe like you already have it. And if you then leave without buying it, then you've lost the chocolate, right? We have similar things, right? Whenever you walk in a mall, whenever you walk near a restaurant, you're going to smell something, and that's on purpose, right? They're kind of sending that smell out. So Cinnabon is famous for this, right? The cinnamon bun company. And they actually try to get their smell out into the mall as much as possible so that you smell it from, you know, many, many different stores away. Okay. And their smell is so famous that, you know, they sell other products that have the same cinnamon smell. Okay. So Abercrombie and Fitch does the exact same thing. Remember, we're trying to figure out where should they go in the mall. And using air vents, they regularly disperse one of their scents, one of their perfumes, part of their brand, which is, you know, one of the best selling fragrances for men. And so when it comes to time to choose where they want to be in the mall, you have Cinnabon sending out cinnamon smells. You have Abercrombie and Fitch, they're trying to send out their perfume smells. They want to be as far away from each other as possible, right? And indeed, these companies often seek out leases in locations in a mall that are as far as possible from one another, because they're both relying on smells to trigger endowment effects to sort of get you to feel like more value towards their products. Okay. All right. So I went a little bit over. That's it for today. So I will see you guys next Thursday, and the proposals due next Friday.